That's mic check, check. Mic check. Hello, everybody. Okay. So how was the poll for you guys? Oh, sorry. Wait, I need to fix something. But yeah, how was the poll for you guys? Did you like the poll, the questions and answers? Undecided. It's okay. So now, yesterday we talked about setting up cameras, right? Building the cameras. So yesterday was essentially what you saw now, what you're seeing now. This is basically what my normal setup for a stationary camera. This is without the matte box, but normally it has a matte box on it. But yeah, so that camera setup is basically for when you want to do stationary shots. This is when you want, this is when actors would come to the camera, or, you know, actors just stays put in one place or whatever, you know. So this is basically, this is pretty much simple. I mean, normal camera setups would be like this, right? So, but what I want to show you, because this is a particularly different kind of setup, because well, normally this kind of setup requires a technician of sorts, but because I know what I'm doing, I'm just gonna do it myself. And let me just show you how I set up for gimbals. And mind you, this is how I would carry a camera. Right. Now, obviously, before you do anything to the camera, you have to switch everything off. Switch off. Okay, this is a good tip. Before you switch off the monitor, you have to switch off any feed that goes to the monitor or comes out from the monitor. Like I just switched off the Teradek that takes the feed from the monitor, and then now I'm switching off the camera, and then I switch off the monitor. That's a good way of practicing. When you want to switch off your monitor, make sure you switch off everything else so that you avoid burning any connection ports to the monitor. So now I want to show you how my camera built. This is my camera built. Well, this is not my usual, because my usual doesn't have a Cinetape, which I will be talking about tomorrow. This Cinetape, how I set up, how to set up Cinetape, essentially. So this is my almost usual camera setup, right? How I set up, how I prep my camera for gimbal work is essentially taking off a few things off the camera and then, you know, putting just the camera on the gimbal, like so. So now the first thing you need to do is taking off the battery. Let me just show you why you should streamline your setup to make the setups quicker. See, the first thing that I need to do is just take off this battery. That's one thing done. Battery off. And why I suggest using a quick release plate for the monitor is because of it's easier, it's quicker, and it's more cleaner to manage. It's easier. And then the cables, I don't tuck them in because you need to take them out. And I leave this cable. Normally this cable goes to the onboard monitor for the camera, because this cable will also go into this, if you can see, well, you probably won't see it, but there's an SDI port on the side here, and you need an SDI cable, which this is. So I just leave that there so that I could just plug it in there so that you can mount another monitor on top of here for the operator of the gimbal. So lock that there. Put that there. Continue on. Now you can leave the Cinetape on the camera, but I won't put it on top of here. Why? Because we need to take this top mount off the camera. So I will need my Allen keys, which in this case, for the ARRI camera, is the 3mm. This one, 3mm Allen keys. I memorized that because, well, you have to memorize it because, you know, when you're dealing with the same camera over and over, you don't want to, you know, play the guessing game, especially when you're in a hurry, right? So take these screws off. Not that much to, you know, to do. Just that's one thing off, and then there's the cable for the Cinetape, like that. Tuck that away. Now I'm taking off the EVF. Now here's a trick that you can do when you're dealing with Alexa cameras. Because I've seen other focus pullers, what they do is that they take off the cable from the back of the camera, which is the main port on the body itself, which is I wouldn't suggest that, because there was an incident a while back. A friend of mine, I think it was his first time dealing with this Alexa mini cameras. What he did, he didn't realize that there is an arrow on top of that cable head. I can show you. Okay, I hope you can see this. There is actually, oh, you can't see it, but there is an arrow on top of here, and it should align with, on the port itself, there is a red dot over it. No, not 4mm, it's 3mm. I'm pretty sure it's 3. Yeah, there is a red dot over the on top of the port on the body itself, which aligns with that arrow, which I think my friend overlooked. And it actually, he jammed the cable into the port, and it broke the cable. So, and that cable is expensive, man. I don't know the price, but you know, it's expensive. So what you can do instead is take off this plate, this back plate behind that EVF, which I'm going to show you right there. Top shot. Yeah, this plate, it goes on there, it screws on there. Unscrew it, take the plate off, take this cable out, and you're free from the EVF. Now, I realized that the only way you can control the camera settings is by using the EVF on the camera, but this is why I like the ARRI WCU4, which is this thing. It's a wireless focus that, you know, integrates with the Alexa cameras, with almost all Alexa cameras, I think. I think apart from Alexa Classic and I guess Plus, I'm not really sure on that. Apart from those two cameras, it works with Alexa cameras. So you take this thing off. This is the EVF support rod. I forgot the name. Yeah. Yeah. This is the support thing for the EVF. Please forgive me if I forget names. I don't normally, you know, forget them because I guess, you know, talking to you guys makes me nervous. But actually, we can log in and control from phone, web browser. Yes, but it takes time. It's a time-consuming process using those things. Unless you have perfect conditions to use those apps, so to speak, you can actually just use, if you have a WCU4, you can actually just use the WCU4 to control it. Yeah. So you have to remember, when you want to build your camera, you have to make sure you find the most flattest, the most lowest profile you can get. Like right now, if you can see, this is pretty much a low profile. What I mean by low profile is that nothing is too high from the other. Like this thing, it's probably about an inch higher than this top plate here. There's a top plate here. Yeah, it's probably about an inch higher right there. And what you're going to do next, now this is a Ronin R2. In most cases, I don't really have to deal with setting up the Ronin, but because I'm, you know, alone here, and no one here like David that is not here to help me out, which I'm quite sad. I mean, David, just hang out here, you know, you don't have to be at your home. Yeah. So David, guys, if you want to know, David Chu is also a technician for the Ronin R2. I don't know if you've done any, if you've gone out as a technician before with the Ronin, but yeah. So this, oh, I forgot. Yeah, can we go to the top shot again? So essentially that is a plate. This is a separate plate from the camera, which goes into the Ronin R2. See what I mean by flat? And it's not higher than, it's no higher than, if you look, it's lower than how high it is on the top rails. See, you probably can't see it, but yeah, it's lower than the rails. So that's why I suggest having a low profile on the camera builds on the top area helps. And then you flip it over. And you take this plate out. This is a dovetail plate or a sliding plate, most would call it. I just call it a sliding plate. You can, you know, as long as you understand it, don't worry about the actual name. As long as you understand what you're asking from your second assistant, or what your second assistant is asking from you, it's fine. You take these, this is a bridge plate. Take this bridge plate off. And place it one side. It's a bit messy now, but it will be tidier. Now, remember when I said during prep, when you're prepping a camera package, you have to get spare stuff. Okay, you can either work with what you already have, or you can ask for a spare rod for uses which I will be showing you in a moment. Take this, this is the rod that goes directly underneath the camera through this MAP 2 plate. What you do is that you take this off. This is a BPA 4 plate. I mean, it's, you know, got a bunch of other really cool names. What you do is that you take this rod and you insert them through here. Keep them there. And what you can do this, if in the future you find yourself using one of these cine tapes, there's these horns, most would call it. What you can do with it is, if you want to make a quick change in between the bolts, you can have one of these. Actually, you can ask for one of these. This is the quick plate that I was talking about, the quick release plate, and this is the mirror side of that quick release plate. So it goes on like that. See? So what I do is, because it's on the low side, I have to, before I mount it, I have to find the sweet spot for it to go underneath the camera. I have to put that first, because it might be troubling to have it lost. And because the only problem with this thing is that I have to use an Allen key to tighten the rod mounts. So yeah, so there it is. It's almost done. I just need to add this bottom plate here. Okay, if you ever want to be a technician, it's a good thing to plan where you place all the screws. And it's a good thing also to prep beforehand, before you go to set, to prep. If, say, the weights should be on this side, you can put the weights wherever you want them. But I put them in such a way because to compensate, because if this thing goes underneath the camera, if you see the camera is much heavier on the AC side or the dumb side, like so, you can see it's heavier on that AC side. This is the front of the camera. And if you see here, this is the AC side, right? This is the operator side. So on the AC side is pretty much heavy. So how do I compensate that is by adding the weights on the opposite side. So this is basically the opposite side. This is the OP side. This is the AC side. So I put the weights more on this side to compensate. So what I do now is, and I will be needing my Allen keys again. And I'm not sure the size, but yeah. Teka saja kena, teka saja kena. Wait, it's 5 millimeter. So use this 5 millimeter Allen keys. So lock it there. Lock that there. You know, if you guys have questions, you can just ask me on the fly, or I'll just answer you on the fly, is what I mean. And it's there's this one other thing that I like to do if you don't have, if say the Ronin R2 doesn't have a DTAP configuration underneath it, what you can do is you can get, if the rental houses have them, you can get one of these EXT to RS cables. What it does is it goes to the back of the camera on the very bottom of the port. It goes there. What you can do with that is you take this DTAP splitter with the 3-pin RS. It's, if you can't see it, but there's 3 pins inside, and this one is an a Fisher, well, I just call it a Fisher cable. There's a longer name for it, but it's a Fisher cable, Fisher 3-pin cable. It's an RS cable. It goes to the end of this converter, and it acts as a power supply. See, we can power up any equipment from the camera. But I'm not going to use this today because obviously this gimbal has a DTAP configuration. So what I'm doing now is just take the camera, and mind the cables though, because these cables are also expensive. You don't want to break them. When you or the technician slides them in, it's gonna be, this is why it's good to have a prep. Well, sorry. And this is why it's good to have it locked. So you lock it first, and then you slide this thing in there. And there you go. It's locked. Okay. So now it's locked. Now all you need to do is manage the cables. This is the cable for the OP monitor, or the onboard monitor for the operator. What you can do with it is you can either, if you have a strap or something, you can just, you know, strap it around, lock it there, and then loop the cable and run it into this. There's an SDI port. I don't know if you can see it from the top view, but there is an SDI port. Can we go to the top shot? There. Let me just take a light to show it to you. Hold on, hold on. I can't find the light. Oh, it's here. There. There is an SDI port over there. You essentially just plug it in there. And then the next thing is powering everything up. Because there's an SDI port underneath the cradle, just loop them through for power. I'm just dealing with this Cinetape now. The cable's not long enough. It's actually long enough, but because the way I arranged it, it's making it a tiny bit short, but you know. And it's in, and it's done. Now I just need this matte box to go to the front of the lens. And you connect the top locking mechanism onto the top rails that I showed you just now. And now you can start to balance it, balance the whole thing. I'm not going to go in depth on how to balance the camera or whatever, but you can start by the tilt axis. In this case, it's not really moving. Just need to lock one more thing down before continue with the balancing. If I can find my Allen keys, which is a complete mess. This never usually happens because normally if I have a gimbal happening in my setup, I would do this in a different mag liner, which is in the back there. That mag liner is actually for gimbal. That's where I would normally set up the gimbal. And I still can't find my Allen keys. Okay, that's fine. I'll just work with what I have. Okay, so continuing on with the build, the setup. Yeah, now I've got it essentially balanced. Now all I have to do is balance. This is the still the tilt axis, I think. Oh yeah, I've got one more cable, the power cable. The power cable is running from this there is this power box at the bottom of the gimbal assembly here, but you probably can't see it. I mean, you can find the pictures in I think in the website. You'll figure it out. Yeah. Oh, bad cabling. This is why you have to get small cables. Well, I got bread. It's about, I think, 30 over kilos, because you have to keep in mind the gimbal itself is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 5 kilo. And then the camera is, well, it's way heavier than that. Okay. Okay, that should be in good balance. And because I already balanced this before, so it's good there. And there's I do have a neat trick when you want to do a bit of, what's this called? What's this axis called again, David? The roll axis. Yeah, the roll axis. I do have a trick to go about dealing with that. But like this, now it's heavy on the AC side. So if I shift this counterweight to the operator side, it should offset the balance. Okay, you just have to find a sweet spot. You can mount it wherever you like. at the bottom, top. As long as you can find that spot, it's fine. Okay, now it's almost there. It's almost there. It's almost perfect. I think the only reason why it's off is because I put something else on there, but it's fine. Oh, there's a single rod there. That's why. Because when I was prepping it, the rod wasn't there. That's the rod that I used to put down here for the Cinetape. So now what you have to do is just turn it on. There you go. And the nice thing about the R2 is it's really forgiving about balance. Yes, exactly. As opposed to the Movi Pro, it's a complete nightmare. Okay, now what I normally do, because I'm not really a trained technician, no, it's okay. Because I'm not really a trained technician, when I want to do auto tune, I would, I would sometimes pick 60 or 50%. And if I were to go more than 60, like 90 or 80%, it's probably because, I don't know, I'm doing some really heavy action or something like that. But again, I'm not going to go into too much details as to how to set up gimbals. I mean, how to set up a specific gimbal. I'm just showing you how I normally set up. Well, I just want to tell you, I just want to point out that it's a good thing when you set up your camera, you streamline your setup so that you minimize your setup time, because you have to understand that when you're working on set, there are DPs or directors that, they can't tolerate with you and your setups, because they think it's not that a problem. They just want the thing to be done with. They just want the shot. They don't really care about the quality of your setup or the how it looks or whatever. I think I've got 3 excellents, but yeah, I got 3 E's. For someone who's not really a pro at setting up Ronin R2, getting 3 E's like that is not bad. So, any questions so far? Thank you. Now let me show you why I suggest you make your setups as small as possible. Now I hope you can see this. Let me get the top shot. Oh, look guys, I just found my Allen keys. It's stuck to, because it's magnetic, it's stuck to the back of this tube light. Silly. So if you see here, you can see that there's a minimum clearance. I mean, if you can tuck in the cable, if you got thin cables for BNCs, you definitely have back clearance. You definitely have more back clearance. You can, do a lot of things. But although this cable is not a thin cable, you still have clearance in the back. It's a bit of a mess, but normally I would use thin cables. I would suggest you use thin cables. This is why it's good if you have your own cables. How much time do you normally take to set up the gimbal mode from the studio mode? Well, yeah, it's a good suggestion actually, but it's a good suggestion if you were suggesting it, but it's a good thing to practice this during prep. When you want to set up, you try to time yourself when you want to switch modes. Like for this, the last time I did a setup like this, it took me about 10 to 15 minutes. And it also depends on how much stuff that you need to take out or how much stuff that you need to add. I think it's, no, it's not. Well, I think I've done it under 30 minutes. I mean, at the most it's 15. But yeah, you should tell, it's a good thing to, I don't want to lie to people, but it's a good thing to tell production that it's around 30 to 45 minutes as suggested by David Chu, or an hour for that matter. But, you know, I know for a fact that I can do this setup for 15 minutes or, you know, 20 minutes, but it's a good thing to tell production that it's more than that, because in the case that you know, you broke something or something's not working, the gimbal is suddenly giving you problems, at least you already told them it's, you know, 45 minutes, you know, and then if it's 45 and if your time is up, you can just say, oh, we're having problem or something. It's a good practice to not lie, but it's a white lie basically, but you know, you do what you have to when you want to, you know, not piss people off. But yeah, it normally would take me, if there are no problems or special configuration, like some setups requires different lenses. When you add a different configuration, like say a longer lens, physically longer lens, I don't mean like the focal length, but like a zoom lens, a short zoom, or you know, any zoom lens, you will have to compensate for that. Like maybe if you time yourself for 15 to 20 minutes, I don't know, you just add 10 more minutes for balancing, you know. I think like I'm taking box to not just a changeover. Yeah, but because my normal practice is that I would already place the gimbal on partially set up on my Mac liner, so that I don't waste time setting up. I don't waste time taking it out and then, you know, starting from scratch. I don't like doing that. I like to save as much time as possible, because I like to be the first person to be ready on set. Sometimes I don't get to be the first person, but I like to be the quickest person on set, because when you're in camera department, you have to remember that a minute that you take setting up, it's a few hundred ringgit actually in production, you know, time. So yeah, it's probably more than a few hundred, but I'm just speculating. It's probably more than that. But yeah, you don't want to waste a minute of production time setting up something like this, because this, if you think about it, it's like a commodity. I mean, you can just do a handheld shot. You don't need gimbals. Why do you need gimbals? You can just do handheld, right? I mean, a gimbal is something that, well, I would say it's a tedious thing to have. I mean, you know, you have to deal with the balancing, you have to deal with, sometimes you can't operate yourself. You need great boys to, you know, hold on to it, you know, basically carrying them around, or, you know, flying it for you while you operate remotely from wheels, or from, there's this thing, I don't have it today, but there's this thing that called a mimic. I just call it a mimic, but it probably has a different name. But I just call it a mimic because there's this one thing that Movi has that's called a mimic. So I just call everything that, you know, that acts the same way as a mimic, you know. So this is the gimbal setup if you want to see how it goes. So yeah, basically, if I want to talk about the weight, this is the weight is hefty, man. I mean, if I just carry it, you know, to put it somewhere, it's not going to be that heavy. But if I were to carry it to operate it, it's going to be super heavy, because this thing, man, it's super heavy. Yeah. And it's unavoidable. I mean, if you take out one of these things, I mean, if you take out the Cinetape, or the two motors that I have on the lens, or the Teradek, and That's just for argument's sake. Where would you put them if you do need them? Where do you think you would put them? Would you put the Teradek on top of here with the monitor for the operator, the gimbal operator, or I don't know, just locking it on a stand and then run a cable to the transmitter for everyone else to see, and run a cable from here to that transmitter? Or I don't know, you want to take something out, sure, but it's still heavy because the camera itself is already heavy. So weight is unavoidable. You either hire grip crews or camera grips that knows how to handle gimbals, or you hire another operator that operates gimbals. But again, that's out of my area of expertise. But that would be my advice. If it were up to me, I would hire someone who has skills in gimbal operating. I wouldn't, just offer my services. Although I may be able to operate the gimbal myself, but I wouldn't offer the DP to operate, because who's going to pull focus? Obviously, my second assistant would have to, because my second assistant is basically my runner-up. If I'm gone, my second AC would have to take over. So this is the gimbal setup. It's quite heavy. Any questions? By the way, this session today is brought to you by Starbucks. Not really. Any questions? Anything, any at all? Soalan apa pun boleh. Can the gimbal withstand water? No. How do you make rain covers for the gimbal? Well, I do have an idea, but I don't have the time to do it. But if I do have to do it, I would just take a plastic cover, just cover from the bottom up, tie it up here, and then do another cover up here to cover the top of that, so that no water goes into that the spot that I tied it over. And I would lock the front here with the plastic bag, and using rubber bands or stuff like that. Can you tell us what's a good plastic material to get for rain covers? There is just one, actually. It's called the polypropylene or polyurethane or something like that, and how to attach to Velcro. Okay, I don't have a sample of that. I do, however, my second assistant has, actually, I'll send you a photo on WhatsApp, because I took a picture once last year when I was dealing with this. I did a makeshift rain cover that allows the articulation of the roll axis, the pan, because we were using it on cranes, and the DP was telling me that we were going to use them for a rainy scene. So I had to make my own rain covers. I'm gonna show you the photo in WhatsApp. Look out for that. Yeah. So that rain cover essentially covers the most important parts on the gimbal. There are, mind you, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So the camera itself is one thing you have to cover. And then the motors themselves, because they have cables running to them for power. And then this motor on the back here, and then this display here. And then obviously the battery. And then there's a couple of ports here. This one is a power in, this one is the SDI out. If you're wondering where the SDI out got its signal, it's from this thing here, the one that I showed you earlier, the one that I plugged in, the BNC cable. So video feed masuk sini, keluar sini. So yeah, my rain cover is basically gonna cover this much area, this much of the area. It's gonna be running inside the. It's gonna be. It's gonna be. I'm just looking because there's a monitor just underneath this camera. I'm trying to show you this. If you can see that, there's a bit of a hole there. You can, if you can see it, a bit of a hole there. I would lace the plastic down there to cover, well, not really to cover, just to remove any constriction for it to move. So it's just gonna start from here, and goes there, and then another one covers that motor and this configuration over here, because on this side here, there's a GPS, according to what it says on the inscription on top of this thing. It says GPS inside. So I do have to cover that because it's electronics. And then obviously the camera. And again, to avoid constricting the articulation, I would, make a separate cover for the camera itself, and then another one there, cover it, tighten up. That's it. There is actually, I think in the US, they do make custom ones, but I don't know if they sell them. It's probably a good thing to look into as camera assistants, because in Malaysia, I don't think there's even anybody owning that. So you kind of have to either makeshift one or buy one. We did once for the Teal rain scene at the house, right? Or was that just umbrellas? I did one, I think. Yeah, I did. But that was a makeshift one. And it's not really, how to say, it's not really that neat. It's not, tak kemas lah. So the one that I did last year was much better, which I'm gonna show a photo to you guys in WhatsApp. And yeah, so that's my gimbal setup. And just a quick note, these Teradeks would normally come with these two antennas. These are very, very long antennas. I think I covered this yesterday. I would switch them to these small ones. It's basically like one of those mushroom antennas, like that. In fact, even the camera itself has another antenna, which is this long. This long. It's about my finger's length. Agak panjang lah. So I opted out with another mushroom antenna, almost the same as this. And I use them on my Teradek and my camera. You only put a safety line for the mat box if you were to mount the R2 on a crane tracking vehicle. Yes, I do. Or I can use tape, or there's this one other thing that I use before. It's one of those paracord lines. You know, those, it's basically a rope. And I would tie them on the end of a carabiner, then just, carabine it in there. But I would use just one carabiner. Why? Because I want to avoid adding weights. What's the difference between these two antennas? Okay, it's very simple. These antennas are omnidirectional, meaning it has more directional coverage, as opposed to having straight antennas. Some of these antennas are actually can help with the it ranges to, it has a bigger range as opposed to mushroom antennas, but it goes one way. It doesn't go in multiple direction. Like for example, let me just plug this out again. Like this antenna, if you to make it simpler, just imagine this antenna is sending out signal in the direction that it's pointing, right? But when you put this antenna, it's sending signal to every direction. That's the only difference. I mean, if you want to talk about range, if you want range, buy a booster. I do have a booster, but obviously it's quite expensive, and those things I essentially spent my own money to buy them. It would look like this, the boosters. Let's see the top shot. If you see there, it's called the Sunhans, SUNHANS. Yes, exactly, like the Teradek array panel. Will there be a monitor for the operator and one more for first AC? Touch on the gimbal. Okay, let me answer Nanda's questions first. Yes, I would. There is actually one thing, but it's in the case. But yeah, there is one attachment on top of here. There will be an attachment here where you can attach a monitor on there, and the operator of the gimbal can use that monitor to see the frame. And normally, well, in my experience, just one monitor for the operator, and you can just, you know, share that, or you would have your own monitor on your hand unit. I'm going to show you how I set up my hand unit, and I think we're quite ahead on time, which means I'm going to show you how I set up my focus station. So hold on. Like the Teradek array, do you ever get wireless focus interference from the Ronin's own remote control wireless protocol, etc.? No, never. But you know, I've never experienced it before. Doesn't mean it won't happen. But you know, it hasn't happened yet. But it could. Any other question? No, you kind of have to turn it on, because if you're using WCU4s, you will definitely have to leave that on, because it's connected through that Wi-Fi. Although it's a 2.4 gigahertz signal, I think. Well, it's actually running on the RF signal. There is actually an RF, it's like an RF transmitter inside the camera that, you know, sends out RF signals. But I think it's the same thing with the Wi-Fi, I think, because the Wi-Fi kind of, I think the Wi-Fi uses the RF sensor thing inside the camera. I'm not really sure, because I'm not a camera technician. I mean, I'm not a camera technician in a sense that I know the anatomies of the camera. But I do know that there is an RF signal emitter inside the camera. That's how the WC4 is connected to the camera. Here's the thing. RF signals, there are bandwidths. If I'm saying it right, there are bandwidths. Like for this WCU4, there's actually a chart. I'm gonna find that chart and I'm gonna send it to you guys. There's an RF signal chart. I think it's from C-Motion. They made that chart. They share it to a lot of focus pullers. I saw it once, but I didn't think of, you know, keeping it or anything, because I already more or less know the RF signal ratio, so to speak. Because To change the RF signal, there's like channel 1 to 7 in the hand unit, and there's like 1 to 14 inside the camera itself, because I think the other 7 of the RF signals, RF bandwidth inside the camera, it's reserved for additional hand units, or I don't know, something else that controls the camera, maybe, because I've never used anything else other than a second hand unit. But yeah, if you're talking about Wi-Fi, unless you're using 2.4 gigahertz RF signals, then there shouldn't be much of a problem, as long as you find the right channel, the right bandwidth for your connection, which is why you have to test it on the day. Let me tell you one thing that I would mostly do every time I reach a movie set. On the day, the moment I touch down on a set, what I would do is, after setting up the camera, I would test the signals. I would, switch on my hand unit, switch on my camera, and walk around the set while testing the signal on the hand unit, just to see if there are interference, or if, I don't know. Obviously, I would look out for interference. And with the Teradek, I would find the right channels or the right bandwidth for the Teradek as well, because apparently there are interferences as well. Although it's a 5 gigahertz, I think 5 gigahertz of RF bandwidth, RF signal. So this 5 gigahertz RF signal is, although it sends out huge data, but it has problems with long distances, which I'm quite surprised. But with 2.4 gigahertz, it gives you distance, but it only gives you so much data to a point, which is why I think having a wireless video transceiver that utilizes 2.4 gigahertz is not a good option, because you should find a wireless video transceiver that has 5 gigahertz. Yeah, exactly. 5 gigahertz has shorter range. A 2.4, however, is much more stable. I don't know the exact science to that, or the exact, logic. But yeah, apparently the 2.4 gigahertz has a better range. Dia boleh tahan range yang jauh-jauh. Dia boleh, so 2.4 gigahertz mechanical stuff is good, but video stuff, no, don't. Unless it's just for monitoring, then fine, go ahead. But if you're using it to help you with focus, then try as best as you can to get a 5 gigahertz wireless video transceiver for your focus. Other questions? Oh. Other questions about the gimbal, about Ronin, about other gimbals from the Ronin? I mentioned earlier about the RS2. Have any of you ever used ADGI RS2, Ronin S2, or Ronin S? No response. RS2 tak pernah. Okay. Well, RS2 agak okay lah, bagus lah, but it only withstand a certain amount of weight. It's about 4.5 kilos, I think. That's the max weight yang dia boleh tahan. If you go over than that, you can still use it, but you're gonna have limitation in terms of panning quality or tilting quality, stuff like that, and you will have trouble balancing it because these cameras are really high. It has a really high construction. Like if you go for like on the side here, there's an A7S II. This A7S II is about what, this big, as opposed to this camera. The dimension is like that. So this camera is about that big, and the A7S is about this big. So there's a big difference there. So it has a really high clearance. So you kind of have to find a good balance there. I did try to build an RS2 before with an Alexa Mini. It works, but the DP says it's too heavy because he wanted something light. Here's the thing: here's the thing when you're a focus player, what you can do is that you can suggest as much as you can, but it's up to the DP. If the DP wants that, then you have to do it. I mean, it's painful sometimes, it's tedious, you feel unappreciated because the DP feels like you feel like the DP is, ignoring your suggestions, although your suggestions could be beneficial to the DP, but it's up to the DP after all. I mean, you're just there to help him get his shots, essentially. Any other questions? We're gonna have a 30 minutes break, and then we're gonna come back. We're gonna break at 7, and we're gonna come back at 7:30, and hopefully by then we could start talking about focus pulling, because I've been talking about camera assisting, so it's probably time to talk about focus. Questions? I'm going to launch another poll for you. Hopefully you'll find that, entertaining. We've got 4 minutes left. 4 minutes left before we go into recess. Used a got a power, a focus motor, and also a trade Vexis while lacking DTAP ports. Oh yeah, they don't have DTAP ports. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, I kind of had to add another battery plate. It's actually the same configuration. You know how A7S has those bottom plates like this thing here. This thing here, the bottom plate, right? Where all the two rods would go through it, and then you'll have those cheap battery plates from Tilta. Yeah, I had to use that and mount it underneath the RS2 on the handle, and then put the battery there, the DTAP and stuff. I actually used the C-Force Mini motor, which is a smaller version of this motor, and I had to use a monitor on the side of that, because imagine this is the RS2, right? So this is the gimbal on top. This is the handle. The monitor would go out this way. The battery would come out from here, and then it's like that. And then battery is there, DTAP stuff, la la la. And the transmitter is going to be right behind that battery plate. So, and then it runs. I run the cable from that. I run a cable from the camera because it's because I was using the Alexa Mini, so I used a really thin SDI cable run around the gimbal arms and then all the way down to the transmitter and out into the monitor, and that's the configuration. It's a whole nother mess, but I get you. What model of fine tip marker pen do you use to put temporary focus marks on your focus rings? Yeah, it's a better option to use Nucleus Nano, but because my setup at the time was with an Alexa Mini, because I've never, to be honest, I've never used an RS2 for a job. I was going to, but because the DP set was too heavy, the setup that I made because I told him we should use a smaller camera for the gimbal, right? But he refuses to, follow that suggestion. So he ended up choosing a Movi Pro instead. What model of fine tip marker pen do you use to put temporary focus marks on your focus ring? To be honest, I don't mark on the focus ring itself. I would put tape over it. I would prefer putting tape, because the thing about equipment is once you get it, you have to keep in mind, whatever you take from the rental house, however you got it, make sure you get it back the same way. When you get it, it's clean, right? Make sure you send it back clean. So I want to save time. Not really save time. I'm lazy. I'm a bit lazy when it comes to really small stuff like this, right? If it's avoidable, might as well. But if it's unavoidable, then what can you do? But it's avoidable. This is something that you can avoid from making. You can avoid from doing marks on the focus rings, right? So why do it? I mean, why waste time cleaning it when you can just rip out the tape, and then you just send it back. Questions anymore? It's already 7 p.m. I hope you guys have cooked ahead before the workshop, as I've advised before. So why don't we go for break? And it's 7:01 right now. Why don't we come back at 7:35 instead, giving you an extra 4 minutes. Sorry, yeah, 4 minutes. Cool? Dinner break? Awesome. I'll see you in a bit. And on the next one, we're just gonna talk briefly about how I set up handhelds, and I'm gonna talk about focus pulling. And till then, have a good dinner. Bye-bye. Jangan tukar gambar.